Hello, everybody. Boo. It's Friday the 13th. I didn't even realize that until you guys said it. I never know what the number of the day is, just the day of the week. This is Three Amigos. We presumably know who the president will be now, but, there's always some drama because it's 2020. I'm joined by Dan Hodgman and Mike
Yes, because it's
Stock.
2020.
Yes,
Yes, that's why the
exactly.
drama. Yes.
Where are you joining us from today, MP? Are you in
I I am in one of these coffee shops that
they must love you there. Just going
they
to the.
Or
they
they
get
can't
my
stand it because he comes in there and he's loud and on meetings all day long.
I don't know. They get my $10 every day. I think they get my. I mean, that seems like it's just for this one chair, and I sit right here for hours.
Let's start a little bit about the markets overall and sort of the big story this week. Two big stories are the elections that it's a slow roll to the end, and also COVID, which unfortunately is a not slow roll. It's exploding quite hard right now.
Mm-hmm.
And
I literally just got a text from my girlfriend. She's on her way up here and she's driving along the highway. And she said there's a COVID testing spot that she drives by every weekend when she comes up. And she goes, I've never seen this. There are 500 plus cars lining the highway, just trying to get off into the testing site.
Really?
yeah, not to be an
Hopefully,
alarmist, even though the numbers are going way up, I think that this counts as not anecdotal evidence, but because for the first time now, I've known a number of people who've got COVID along the way in waves and stuff, but this is the first time where, like, in a week period, multiple people that I know or in my sphere have tested positive for it. So that just to me indicates that the numbers had to be quite high, at least in the Chicago area.
I'm
So
hearing it. My niece just had it, and my sister sent a picture and says, "This is what COVID looks like." And my niece is smiling, and in the picture, and she's like, she's had a worse cold, but everybody handles it differently. And it could be lethal or deadly or whatever. So,
Yeah.
yeah, the markets aren't. They're not even responding to this. I was like an idiot and got short yesterday right at the open because another day, another headline came out with a COVID hit record number of cases, and I got stopped out. I put a fairly close stop, and I got stopped out. And I typically don't trade like that, but I traded off a headline, which the markets don't care about COVID. So that was a stupid trade.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting, Mike, you make a good point there. Everyone handles it differently. My mom just got over it. I live 3 blocks from their house, so it's pretty common for me to just go over there and grab a bite to eat if she's cooking dinner or something. And two of my siblings were up here, and we were all around my parents and my mom for 3 or 4 days right in the beginning, not realizing she had it. And we saw her the day she went and got tested, only got tested because she was feeling kind of punky. It wasn't too bad. I thought the crazy thing was Punky down a little bit. But so we all went and got tested, including my dad, who sleeps in the same bed as her. And we all went negative. And so she went back and got another test to make sure she didn't have a false positive. So she was positive. So it's totally different everywhere you look, and you've got to be really cautious.
Well, Elon Musk had 2 negatives and 2 positive. Now he's talking.
yeah. Yeah, Dan, Punky. I think that mustache is giving you that like old timey, like, hey, Punky, 22 skidoo.
I have a 16 skidoo.
Yeah.
Jack, can you explain to me what happened this week with the blow off tops?
I mean, I think a lot of it is still what we talked about last week of the uncertainty from the election dissipating. I mean, the VIX was so high going into it, just not anticipating, but just pricing in the small probability of one of these edge cases. And you could like imagine if instead of the scenario we have now in the election, imagine if it was just a few thousand votes or a few hundred votes in one state that was changing it. And there were these legal things and it was unclear who's going to take over. So I just think as that comes into focus, plus the likely split powers in Washington between Congress and the president, it's just something that the market likes going forward. Probably not going to be any rollbacks of the taxes and probably a better chance of stimulus. Although now that's the thing. I don't know if they're pricing in because it seems like the lame duck administration may or may not want to do anything with that. And as you said, when they're not in power, Republicans love fiscal responsibility. So we could go through a scenario where there's no stimulus for quite some time, and people are really going to start hurting around now. I mean, we've only started some of the permanent layoffs when you look at a lot of these industries that have been hit. So,
and we're talking, and just really quick, so the listeners know, we're talking about the blow off top that happened on November 9th, where the S&P was 150 handles higher.
Yeah, that was the vaccine too.
Yeah, so that's what I was going to follow up with. So not only did we have some more concrete stuff coming through with the elections Sunday night into Monday or last weekend, but then Sunday night, we also got the notification about 8:00 at night that Pfizer has a vaccine that is proving 90% effective. The important thing that I think people started to realize, though they sure did, the important thing, though, that I think we have to talk about as the markets reacted to that was, you've heard me, a lot of people have heard me talk about, there's two stages that come after a major news event or major number release that really is an unexpected thing. There's going to be, first off, there's an emotional reaction. There is an emotion, and that's what we saw. We saw that tear to the upside. That was the emotion. Then there is the reaction to the emotion and the actual news that came out, because yes, 90% effective vaccine, but we have to be realistic. Number of people in the world, 7+ billion, to get the vaccine out across the world, because it's not just the United States, it's across the world here. The numbers, my buddy works for a company that actually manufactures vaccines, and they have a stockpile of this vaccine already waiting for FDA approval to get released. But it's such a minute number of people that will get it within the first year, is the way he was explaining it to me.
Within this year, the first year?
Within the next 365 days, once it's released. Within the first year, once it's released and approved by the FDA, he goes, and I said, what are the cases of me getting it? Say I wanted to get my COVID-19 vaccine. What are the odds of me getting it quickly? He goes, I mean, at the rate we can produce it, and no matter how many manufacturers out there can produce it, he goes, it's not realistic for you to get it probably even in the first year. You're such a low risk person for this. Yep. You're young, healthy. They're focused on where they're going to get these to the right people. And so I think that's what you started to see here, why we had the blow off top. And blow off top, just for those listening, a blow off top is when the market screams higher and then retraces right away. We closed our gap in less than 18 hours, I think it was. So that's what we saw. They're fun to trade if you catch the right side of it, but at the end of the day, they're not what we're looking for. You may have caught the initial move when you got the notification that this vaccine, everyone knew it was going to take off. I mean, it just made sense. You may have caught
everybody's feeling good there's a bunch of people feeling good over the weekend.
Right.
Possibly change power. I saw the Monday and I'm like, holy cow, the headlines, everything was just monster up. I mean, and then trading throughout the day and even throughout this week has been pretty exciting, uneventful. It's kind of
long hangover.
Yeah. And then Jack, you just mentioned what's it pricing in right now?
So there's a super important caveat to the Pfizer vaccine. If anything, the best news from it is that it's hopeful for other vaccines, because, news isn't great at digesting minutia or like the actual technical details. And Dan went into some of this, but this Pfizer vaccine, it's 2 stages. You have to take 3 weeks apart, and it has to be cold stored, I believe, at not like your freezer at home, like freezers that don't exist in large quantities. So as we see these numbers exploding, I mean, like if we're going to keep on adding 150, 200,000, like there's a chance that we inadvertently just reach herd immunity before we even get this Pfizer vaccine out to everyone. So like, I think that what the market is pricing in now is more stimulus eventually, and no tax recuts and no disaster from the election.
Yeah.
That's, I think, all comes down to.
I think you're spot on. I think the stimulus thing is going to be a big question. I think as the emotions start to at least slow a little bit here with election, I struggled to not imagine both sides of the aisle want to get something out there with this resurging cases. I don't think this is a partisan. I think this is a very bipartisan issue. They need to put their issues aside and focus on the fact that this economy is going to need it. I mean, I mentioned this morning on our market forecast, and I'll say this again. I kind of had like a rude awakening last night. I was going through Facebook and I saw a friend of mine posting about a bunch of mom and pop restaurants that he's been going to since he was a little kid, now closing. And he always took it for granted that he could go to the same restaurant, get the same meal all the time. And now all he has by him are just the big chain restaurants that can afford to make it through this. But it's that local, it's that small time, small business that really needs some sort of support. And I really do hope something comes through.
Well, that's why none of this shows up in the markets, because that's the, for lack of a better word, I call it the pruning. I mean, we did it in 2008. You pruned the economy of things that aren't going to continue with us for and can sustain and make it through, the Great Recession. So now the COVID time, I mean, if you're not digital, yeah, you either need a strong local base, or sorry, I mean, like, you got to adapt or die, and with technology and everything so quickly, and people's habits that do change much quicker than they did in the past. I mean, you got to be on the digital side, or you got to be to where the customer is. And so sad, but it's also part of, the risk of opening up your own business too. So, I'm an entrepreneur too, so I'm not just throwing that out there and saying, hey, but you
thanks,
do have
Ayn Rand.
Right. You do always have to look at, like, what's the future, and if can I still sustain 3 years from now if flying cars existed and I am, all this stuff. So, like, you got to always be thinking about it.
And to caveat on that, Disney Plus just put out their earnings yesterday, or Disney put their earnings out yesterday, better than expected. They still haven't opened the California parks. Florida's open, but they shifted into the technology industry, and they added Disney Plus, a streaming service that now has 73 million subscribers. It's amazing.
And that's all good and well, but that's why I think that it's especially, like, I wish there was some kind of bailout for bars and restaurants, because I feel like they're like, that's not, you can't eat ones and zeros. I mean, like, I think that it's a shame, because through no fault of their own, and that is a space too where, like, local restaurants, local bars and stuff, Silicon Valley's never going to come up with a better way to do those. They're never going to disrupt that industry, because it's antithetical to what people want from that. And it's too small a slice for them to go into, right? Like, there's never going to be, Buffalo friggin' Wild Wings is never going to, like, be the place to go in your town. And if it is, that's a sad state of affairs, I'd say, for the entire country.
Right. If I can find it in the freezer section in the grocery store, I'm probably not my favorite kind of restaurant. I want to go to the spot that has their special recipe that was handed down from, grandpa. This is what grandpa used to make back in the 50s. Those are the fun spots to go. I'd hate to see some of my restaurants and my favorite spots fall down that path. Yeah, well, we can continue this too. Let's jump into some levels. Absolutely. On the ES, and we can pepper in some of our, I'm trying to think of what is some nostalgia of things gone. Dan, ES up again today. What are you looking at?
Well, ES isn't up a whole lot overall on the week. Keep that in mind. 3,500 would, if we get back to 3,500, weeks unchanged. We're 50 points up, 60 points up right now. Not really much of a change on the week. Obviously, we saw the big Monday move, retrace pretty quickly. Like I said, about 18 to 24 hours. We closed that gap right back to unchanged. We bounced a little bit. So here's what I'm going to keep an eye on. You guys know me when I talk about some of these levels, they are ranges. Do not think that it's finite. I will continue to remind it and say that every time I bring up levels. 35.75 to the high side. We could definitely move higher. I mean, continue to watch the news. If other vaccine companies come out and say they've got something, that could really help kind of improve the process here. And then to the downside, 3,500. There's some support there. I'm going to keep watching it, and that's where I'm looking for reaction in the S&Ps. Middle of the road.
You had to blow off top, Danny, on Monday, and then when it sold off the rest of Monday, I mean, that was Monday morning.
Right.
Sold off the rest of Monday.
It was like the first hour.
Yeah, and then since then, it's been the 35.75 down to the 35.12.
Yeah.
35.
Yeah, I've been kind of watching like all week that 60 to 65. Anything run to 75, it's like, okay, I'm going to get in here and short this thing right now.
Yeah, it's a 70 handle range, which is kind of tight. For the whole week, that's you got to be pretty good at carving up that market to really, because you're not getting too many breakouts. Anyway.
Right. I like how you and I are looking at the same thing here. And what I think's important for traders is this is something that's kind of been really hitting home for me lately, is like cutting back on the number of trades. A lot of traders I've talked to, they have this certain expectation of trades, which is fine. The one thing I can't stress enough is why not minimize your costs of doing business, i.e. fees and commissions and too much risk on the table. If you can kind of define this channel, I'm going to bring it back here, whether it's this way, or straight across. If you can have this channel, you can really be comfortable, relaxed, wait for that market to come to the edge or that extreme.
Yep.
Fade it.
That's the play.
Sit back, let it come to the other side, get out, look for the next fade. And maybe you get 3 or 4, 5 trades in a week, but we're looking at a 65, 70 point range here. That's some good profits to get in these trades.
A sideways trader should be doing okay right now. And sideways trader, they play those ranges. Yep. And my buddy texted me a couple days ago. He's like, man, this market's a fade market. He's like, you get to extremes and you fade it. And so that's been working right now. And, it's this week's play. What happens. But, I mean, overall, it's an uptrend that's been happening. And the whole buy the F and dip is a big a word I've been hearing everybody say in the Robinhood world. Whenever it dips, just buy it. So, yeah, but either way, this has been a sideways trade this week.
Yep. Cool. So as we switch over to the NASDAQ, sort of the overall story of the week is rotation. So basically, whenever we have good macroeconomic news, as far as in this case, a vaccine or stuff like that, you're going to see some rotation. Obviously, the tech stocks have been bid up so much this year that when you get the good macro news, you see that tend to unwind more versus the ES, and especially the small caps come screaming up. How much were they up on Monday initially? Like 6-7% or something on the Russell?
Yeah.
Just initially.
Russell was the strongest of them all, and I think that's off positive hopes of the vaccine. Smaller caps, smaller businesses that really do need people out and kind of taking advantage of that brick and mortar. But that's been the laggard over the last 9 months.
Which one? Russell or NASDAQ?
The Russell. The NASDAQ though, but this is what I think is really interesting this whole week. You saw Dow making the highs, intraday high and new high settles. You saw S&Ps making a new intraday high. NASDAQ failed. And I think it failed because these are the tech stocks. These are the companies that are benefiting on everyone being at home, people paying those subscription fees, things like Zoom, things like Netflix, Amazon, all of that's involved in this NASDAQ are concerned of people getting back. There's concern of people getting back out in the economy. Now, I think it's going to start to flip. I think you're starting to see it already of rotation of like, hey, we got to increase the cases. People are still going to be investing, utilizing these businesses and these companies. And there's a possibility that we're going to see good revenues and people are going to reinvest into those.
Danny and Jack, there's a reason why we call this three amigos. It's not because we're three buddies here talking about it, but because these three markets move together. And this week, we saw that like go out of whack. And the great thing about watching these three markets is because you try to understand what's the leader, what's the lagger, and which one's pulling each other in a certain way. So this was a really funky week. I would call it for they didn't really go hand in hand too much. It was kind of an opposite. Like Monday was really odd. I mean, just every day it seemed like it was really odd on who was leading and who was lagging and whatnot.
Yeah, absolutely. There was some tension amongst the amigos.
Yeah. So just follow up to round out the NASDAQ here, places that I'm keeping an eye. The channel, 12,100 down to 11,820. And then if we get below 820, I got another checkpoint on my models down at 460.
Very nice.
460.
Okay.
All right. Time for the Dow. Dow time.
Strongest of the three this week. First time in a while, the Dow is the strong.
I'm proud. I'm proud of the Dow.
Last week it was, I don't look at the Dow. I'm not a big Dow guy anymore. Now he's Mr. Dow.
Well, I mean, I'm hanging out with the S&P now. I just don't really. That's the old news.
You gotta.
I dated Dow for a long time and
adjust your friends every so often.
Yeah. Yes.
That one made the new highs finally.
Which was the biggest driver though? Because the Dow is made up of the 30 stocks, and which stock drove it higher? You guys know?
Probably the transports, I would guess. They were up big this week. Like all the stuff that's been battered on the vaccine news is going to come back the most. I'm not always at any given time. I don't know what's all in the Dow. It's not something that I trade a ton, but yeah, I would say whatever's been battered value.
Yeah, I think so.
So are there any levels we're looking at there?
Well, yeah, I mean, we eclipsed 30,000, Dow 30,000. We did eclipse it. We've fallen back a little bit. So I'm not putting a high side on 30,000 just yet. I think I've got a little bit before that, 29,500. And this is a bigger range. I mean, I'm looking almost 1,000 points here down to 28,650. 28,650. That's what I'm seeing in the Dow right now. We've got a multiple resistance levels up at that 29,500. And it's created some opportunity. We obviously saw it blow right through there the other day, but it was a fast move through, came right back down to 500, and from 500 we broke there. So that's what I got my eyes on here.
Yeah, and I think that the Dow is going to be most, as it has been throughout this whole 2020 debacle, it's going to be the most sensitive to negative COVID news. Just a little bit more. Obviously, the Russell will be the most, but the Dow, just from its composition, is going to be a little bit more so than the S&P, and then the Nasdaq could be good news. Nasdaq, you do you, man. You do you, right? Nasdaq. Yeah. I mean, there's just still a lot of stuff on the Nasdaq. It's incredible that like after these splits, some of those, the companies like, Apple and Tesla and stuff are still so strong. Like you talk about a blow off top that didn't stop. I mean, in pre-split, Tesla's sitting at 2,500 still, so that's interesting.
Well, question: What would the high been up? I mean, it's a guess, but there's probably some math around it. If Pfizer was still in the Dow and Pfizer was screened higher on Monday,
we'd be 32,000.
Well, it's tough.
And then the CEO had a working order up there about $6 million worth of his.
Yeah, I was gonna say 5.6 million of shares he sold, so he knew he knew it was coming.
Well, it's hard to say though too, because its position in the Dow would depend on what its price is, because we've been over this. Dow is a silly index that is price weighted. So Pfizer was up 8% or something. I don't know.
Yep.
Well. Anyway, we'll find out a whole lot more this next week.
Funky or Punky week this
week. Yeah.
Funky or Punky. There's our title. I love how we always come up with a good title right in the middle of it. Funky or Punky.
All right, guys. I think that's all for this edition. Hope you all have a nice weekend out there. We'll be back to do battle with these indices next week. In the meantime, trade well, everyone. We'll see you later.